Yeah, and I think when we say it's not a system, it's really, it's never a single solution, right? It's really about taking a step back, understanding what work is your team doing at the end of the month that's creating this crunch, right? And think about how you can transfer into more real-time, repeatable activities over the entire month, right? Finding areas where real-time data is available, right? And then transacting on it more frequently rather than just at one point in the end of the month, right? And when I think about working with my team to create a new process or optimize, it's really these three tendencies that we're thinking about, and it's creating processes that are repeatable, that are automated, and that are auditable, right? And when we're thinking about repeatable, it's really about scale and making sure that what you're creating is manageable. Automated is obviously automating in a reliable way, in a predictable way, in a systematic way. And auditable is really, you want it to be accurate, you want it to be transparent, you want it to be operating in a way that can be documented and understood by really anyone. And when we talk about the continuous close, I think that there are some companies out there that might have requirements for closing the books multiple times a month.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the really fun parts of this job is getting to work with companies at all different kind of stages of maturity. And and I think it's important to sort of try and not like skip steps, I think, in the process. The goal shouldn't be kind of turn around and just sort of conceptually close everything all the time because it sounds like a good idea or it seems sort of like it's kind of trending. But right, it's always sort of important to start with like what are the problems we're trying to solve here and what are the pain points, and then how do we kind of walk back into the things we should prioritize, right? And so I do think there's sort of like some foundational kind of building blocks to think about. The first one is really going from, something that is living in someone's mind and someone's head right into how are we just making sure we're actually documenting things, organizing things, and getting a good foundation in place. Like, everyone has a closed checklist, hopefully, right, for a reason, which is, if I get hit by a bus tomorrow, it'd be really helpful that someone who's coming in can actually understand what are the tasks, how is it getting done, what are the business systems involved, and can kind of pick up from where it's been left off. Um, it's also important to get those things in place because now we can start to actually think about mapping out the workflows, right? I mean, the thing about the close process itself is that it's a series of 10 or 100 or 1,000 kind of discrete processes that all need to be run at the same time under a lot of pressure. And only by sort of starting to break these things apart can we actually see what's interrelated, what's blocking other types of work, what are those dependencies, right? And think through critically what are the things that then we can think about being more proactive and pulling forward into the current period, right? So if we're looking at our work and starting to think through, okay, what's actually going to make the biggest difference?
And the idea of doing this in a continuous fashion is not that novel, right? It's just instead of doing that review process at one point at the end of the month so that there's a tremendous amount of work, right? You think about reviewing those transactions on a more regular basis, whether that's daily, weekly, whatever cadence makes sense for your organization, right? You want to record that expense, reclass, amortization, even reconcile earlier. Not only does it shift the work up and throughout the month as opposed to at one point in the end, you're also creating data that will be available in real time, right? So you'll have more real-time P&L data. And, if there are errors that take place sometimes within that prepaid process, right, you'll be able to point those out earlier. And I think, it's not that intricate of an example, but it's just about taking a different approach to how you're transacting, right?
I think the sort of I think one of the really sort of exciting things about AI and how it's going to be applied to a lot of these accounting workflows is how effective it is at actually making decisions around how should something be accounted for, what are the abstractions from documents, from data, and kind of that translation from the sort of conceptual accounting into the sort of recurring practice and the credits and debits. And so much of what Numeric we've been kind of focused on is like, how do you actually start to think about a product that hopefully really reshapes many of these accounting workflows to do more in the current period than in the things that are oftentimes sort of done retrospectively, right? And so prepaid expenses is a great example. It's a simple example, right? I think we're all sort of, it's a pretty familiar with how to amortize, kind of, something we want to expense. Uh, but I think these concepts are going to apply to pretty much everything about how we think about, kind of how is value sort of translated and sort of held and then sort of managed over time, right? And I think we're very quickly sort of trending to a world where, instead of potentially purchasing something like a lease accounting software or a fixed asset accounting software, or pulling out the spreadsheet to kind of define how do you want to go calculate how you want to account for, interest that's being accrued on a convertible note that you've issued, right? You're going to start with this sort of question of uploading those documents or data and intent kind of into a product and ending up with something that's actually doing the abstractions and getting you to the sort of those transactions on an ongoing basis. And that's super exciting because those are some of the sort of core things that you see teams spending a lot of time in closing the book, dealing with, both the sort of high volume things to the really complex things. Um, and what we see teams, increasingly doing is kind of managing these on an ongoing basis, and then kind of tailoring that and sort of partnering that with kind of really nice reporting and analytics to go kind of drive kind of more continuous updates, right? Like um, uh, if we think about sort of the role and sort of I think a place that accounting teams can really position themselves as sort of thinking more about this sort of full stack kind of concept, right? This sort of level of okay, I think accountants are going to do more forecasting and more reporting in their jobs on an ongoing basis. This is a great one because you own the underlying data of the bank accounts, the reconciliations, and you're very well positioned to be able to say, look, based on where we are month to date, we expect we're going to come in at X based on our sort of understanding. And again, it sort of comes down to a fundamental perspective that you need to get the underlying data infrastructure right, but then you can really sort of push on sort of doing things on a more continuous basis.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah. So here, I think this is just one example. I mean, we of a company, Awardco, that we've had the privilege of working with for about a year, maybe a year and a half, and was a very early sort of partner with us on kind of building out a number of these sort of monitoring examples. And I think what I think has been really cool from my vantage point has been there are a lot that are very, very consistent across teams. And I actually think the first place to even look is just in the closed checklist itself, which is what are the exports we're running to go double check data at the end of the period anyway, right? Those are the first place to start. But then you start to see sort of like really weird patterns, not weird, but like unique patterns emerge within companies themselves, right? What are the things based on your business systems, your processes are starting to come up? And so while a lot of that might be data hygiene related, a lot of it might be more compliance oriented around how are we actually double checking, for our SOX controls things on a more ongoing basis and signing off that, things are okay. It might be things of, oh, like this period for some reason something was booked to an equity account from an AP account. Why would that be the case? What are the movements that we don't expect? And starting to build that muscle, which is okay, cool. Maybe if we see something weird happen once, that might be fine. We might go fix that. But if we see it twice, we should probably start to think about, creating the structures and processes to better flag if, those things more proactively on an ongoing basis.
Yes, I love this slide. I think, this is all in an effort to get increased quality and decreased duration to close your books, right? It's not all about that, but that's a big part of this, right? And if you look back after you've, you know, reworked a lot of your processes to have this cycle, right, that could be transacted on multiple times through the month, this is what it'll look like, right? You'll have a bunch of silos going on throughout the month, and then you'll get to the end of the month and there'll be a lot less work to do. There'll be decreased duration to close the books as a whole because you'll have created processes that could just continue to work as the month's going on. And so that's really what this, this picture here is trying to present, right? And that'll lead to some of the downstream benefits that we've been talking about, right? Detecting errors earlier on, being able to do analytics, provide real tangible business data throughout the month rather than 6 days, 4 days, 10 days after the month. You can call them processes, you can call them apps. Maybe one day we'll even have bots working on our team that are just going to be running through a well thought out process continuously throughout the month, right? Whether it's continuous or at the end of the month, that's up to your decision if you see the tangible benefits of doing that. But it's going to look like that other slide that had a bunch of circles, right? It's just going to be a bunch of processes running. And really what I think will end up happening, all the teams that I've entered in my career, it's about all processes start with downloading a report and manipulating data and running formulas in Excel files, right? And what the key thing that I'm trying to do now with my team and we're executing on is starting the process at the end of that, right? The data should flow automatically, right? And then those calculations, they should be predictable. They should be happening automatically. The analysis should happen automatically.
Yeah, I think look, I think we are so early on in this sort of next age of AI. I think we are, like I think we should think about this as sort of a kind of wave that probably plays out across decades and not sort of months or weeks or even sort of individual years. And so I think we're just like so at the beginning of seeing how these processes, workflows, jobs are really going to be kind of reshaped and kind of rethought. And I do think so much of this comes down to like the ability now to just have software and tools that is like they're deeply intelligent, kind of baked into the software itself, right? So the ability for something to reason about a contract, the obligations, how it should be accounted for, a complex contract, and how, we should journalize it. Um, we're just in the earliest innings here, and I think that's really exciting because I do think it's going to give us chances to really fundamentally rethink a lot of how this work has been done in very new and kind of like hopefully refreshing ways that hasn't been possible with the sort of last generation of software, right? Which was so much about digitizing sort of manual processes and going from tracking things in pen and paper or then from spreadsheets into these workflows. So I think the theme here, and one of the big themes is going to be we're going to have software that is just really, really customized and personalized to businesses, right? And I think that's going to enable us to go sort of have hubs and have centralized a lot of these workflows that now are in disparate places into one place where you can actually see across all of your various different types of financial transactions, different types of reconciliations and financial data that is then going to make that hopefully information